Hi, this is Tom. Welcome to my channel. I'm going to go through a session with Claude Code, and what I had to do was create a video, or actually a NotebookLM with several videos. So I'm going to refresh on my browser, and we'll see the notebook come up. So this is the new video, Why the Allies Won by Overy. That's the author's name. This is a book on World War II. I'll click on the notebook, and Claude Code created the notebook. It did the research for the sources, added the sources, and created the videos. There's 3 videos that it created. So I'm going to go through the session. So I thought that might be a good way of doing it, just to kind of show how this works. And uh, I learned a bunch of stuff as I was going through this that I didn't realize. So I started out and I gave it a context document that was basically, in my thinking, bringing it up to speed, but I didn't need to do that because it already knew all of this stuff. And what it does is it creates a folder under your users right here. So this is, I didn't realize it was doing this. I create, you start out by giving it a folder. You go to Claude Code, you start a session, and then you can give it access to a folder, which was this one here. I called Agent Test under Documents. And then when I did that, this is what I didn't know, was it creates its own folder, .claude. And this is where it had its own memory and context and a bunch of stuff that it was reading. So I gave it information that I had saved that I thought it would need to get up to speed, because this is where you used to have to do things from one session to another, but now it just writes it. It wrote this on my computer, evidently asked me for permission. I said, okay, sure. And so it wrote its memory and its context and everything and read it from that. So some of this is my coming up to speed on what it was doing. And I told it what I wanted it to do. Was what I had done previously was I had it create videos in a notebook that I already had. And I thought, well, why don't I just have it create the whole notebook? And so that was the task for this session. And so I worked, this is basically getting this in order. And then it asked me some questions. What makes for a good notebook? And I said it produces good videos. It asked me what to do it on. I said, let's do Why the Allies Won, the book. I forget the author's name, but I think you'll know it. And then how many sources? It suggested 3. I said, okay, how many videos? 3, sounds good. And I think it did 10 sources. So it did the research for the sources and created the videos. So I said, I have an idea on how to proceed, but before I tell you, I want to make sure you're ready to proceed. That is, that you have the info that you need and that I've answered your questions. And so it said basically what it knew, and I'll give a little background on this. So in order to do this, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is that there's an API that Google has released, but only on higher versions. So I'm just using the basic $20 a month. That's what I have for Claude Code and also for Google. So the API, you need like a more expensive version, not the $20 version. But somebody came up with a workaround, which is a command line interface that can be used to create notebook instances programmatically. And so that's what I gave the Claude Code. Basically told it what it was, and it researched how it worked, and that's what it's using to create the notebooks. So this was it, finding up stuff, finding out things, and figuring out how to create the notebook. Okay. And so the way that I told it that I thought would be good for it to proceed would be to write itself new skills. So the way that Claude Code works is through skills. So skills are basically kind of safe prompts, I guess you could say. Um, and this is a really cool architecture because I used to do this sort of thing uh, through documents. Basically, I would save as documents prompts and give the AI these prompts. And so it would know how to do stuff. Well, now it does that on its own, and it calls it skills. So it writes itself skills, which are basically prompts on how to do certain things, how to do certain tasks. So with creating a notebook, for example, it would be like how to do the research, how to create the notebook, um, how to delete sources, just all of these sorts of things that you would do if you were in a notebook and doing it yourself, kind of clicking around and doing stuff. So I said, well, why don't you create yourself the new skills that you need to create a notebook? Because it already knew how to create sources, it knew how to create videos, how to delete sources, but this was in the context of an already existing notebook. So it added the sources that it needed. And then one of the things was that there's a new feature that Google gave to notebooks, which I haven't played around with, but apparently very powerful and sounds pretty neat. And that is that before you could only tell a notebook a couple of sentences about how you wanted it to be. Like, for example, you can use the notebook for research, or you could use it for content, or you could use it as a tutor. So you could give it a lot of information. You can say, okay, use all of these sources that you have, and I want you to teach me on the basis of these sources about whatever thing you want to learn. And you can tell it in like a lot of detail about how you want it to go about doing these things. So that's a configuration you could do. So I was thinking that this is something you would do when you created the notebook, but I found out no, it's something you do after a notebook is created. And we were talking some about that, and decided to do that later because what I wanted to do was just get a proof of concept going where it can create the notebook. It can do so. What it's doing is it does the research before, so it knows what sources to put in the notebook. So on its own, it's researching the topic, figuring out the sources to give to NotebookLM. I think this is how it's doing it. Because there's multiple ways that it can do these things. But that's how I think this is doing it. And it gives it the sources, and then it loads the notebook, and then it creates the video. So this is what we were talking about, just how to do this. And then it came into this part here. So this is something I wanted to share. This is something I didn't know. And it says, before we do that, one more housekeeping chore. This one's mine. The whole process is new to me, so I'm learning things as we go along. I can see some value in having sources in my local folder, which was the first workflow that I had. But now, since I'm having you take care of the sources, basically, I don't need that. So what I'm talking about, the first thing that I did was I have in this folder here called Agent Test, I had source material that it could read and load into NotebookLM. And it can do that very efficiently. It doesn't have to like copy over. One of the things you want to be thinking of is that you don't want to burn too many tokens because on the $20 plan, I can burn through tokens really quickly. So a neat thing about this workflow that I'm describing is it's very efficient because it's having NotebookLM do most of the work. So NotebookLM is burning all the tokens, and I don't have to worry about that because that's free. Um, so very, very neat the way that this worked out. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to worry about the source material, so I don't need that in agent test. And I was saying, well, because that's the folder that I gave it uh, permissions to use. And I said, well, basically, I can just clean all of that out, and it agreed with me. And what I found out in this interacting with it is that it created this other folder, this .cloud one, and that's the one. I was thinking that somehow on the server, on its end, it had the information that it needed about uh, how to run the tasks, and just everything about what it's doing. It's like, no, it's actually saving all of this on my computer and reading all of that and doing all of this um, thing, all these things. And this opens up a whole lot of possibilities because, well, this is one of the things I asked it. Let me see if I get to it here. It asked me why I gave it all the context to start the the session that we worked on. And I said, I did this because I thought that was the right workflow. I don't know what you know. If you know everything you need to start a session, I can just say something like, hi, how's it going? And it basically told me, yeah, that's all you need to do. Just say hello. It knows everything. It knows everything that we've been doing, everything that it needs to know. So I can just say, okay, let's continue on. Let's do our next thing. So very neat. So it told me, yeah, go ahead. You can delete all the folders. You don't need that. I mean, all the files from the folder. And then, it, so I was thinking, I was still thinking that it was, had information on its end, and then on my end, because I noticed like what I have in my folder is not necessarily up to date on what it knows about my folder. And I was right about that, but not right about the mechanism. So I was thinking this was all like the server where it's operating from, and it said, no, I've got everything on your computer, and what it is it's that .cloud folder that I showed you. So that's where it's got information about what's on the folder that I gave it access to. So the very first thing, you start up the first session, you're working with Claude Code, and you give it access to a folder, which was this one. And then from that, this is what I didn't know, it creates this .cloud folder, and it uses that to track what's going on the other folder. And this is where it's reading and writing all of its skills, all the stuff we're talking about, its memory, its context, everything. Very cool. And so I said, well, I know I had actually deleted all of these uh, files from the folder I gave it access to, but it didn't know that I had deleted them. And the reason was like it just hadn't checked. So if it had checked, then it would have been up to date. So I said, well, I noticed you didn't know that I deleted this. What's going on? And it told me that it has this other folder that it uses to track everything. And basically it just needs to read what's going on, and then it can keep things up to date. So I think that's enough information on just some of how the thing was working that I wasn't aware of. And then let me jump down to here. So I said, okay, so you're writing to here. This is this .cloud folder that it created. And I said, I thought that this other folder is what I gave you access to. But I actually gave it access to this first folder I told you about, the one you start with. And I gave it access to this other folder, and I found out I can actually give it access to other folders on my computer, which I wasn't aware of. And I think this is all quite new because I think it's because of OpenClaw, if you've heard of that. But it's kind of forced the hand on these big companies to where they'll prompt you for more access to your computer so they can do more stuff, which is really cool. and because it could do this whole workflow of the NotebookLM. And this I've found to be very, very useful because I can do a ton of stuff without burning a lot of tokens. Because again, I'm just on the $20 plan. And the main thing that I'm using Notebook AI for are building web apps and using Notebook LM to create videos. And until just like recently, last couple of days, I've been using it to like get sources, do research, do different things. But I've been the one that's been creating the videos in the notebooks. But now it can do the whole thing. And really, really cool. So here, this is me just learning like how this thing works, which I was sharing with you. And here I asked it, could I give you access to more folders if I wanted to? And it said yes. And it told me, how I could do that. It's like, well, that's cool because there's a lot of possibilities there about different things you can do. Like one of the things that I thought of was for messaging. So what I mean by that is you can have multiple AI. Like I've got Claude Code. Another one would be Codex from OpenAI, and I can have the two of them communicating with one another. Since I just learned today that I didn't know they could write to these folders. I just thought they could read. But if they can write and read, they can pass information to one another. So you can have, Codex working on one task and have Claude Code working on another task. You can figure out, well, which AIs, because the AIs are not identical. They're all roughly, equally good. Although I'd say Claude Code seems to have a leg up, but Gemini just released a new version, and they're all competing. So it's very cool that they can communicate with one another through this mechanism. You can have them be doing tasks, and anyway, it's what's the expression? A bold new world that we're living in. So very cool that it can pass messages. Okay, so in order to start, I need to authenticate. So that's the one thing that it can't do. So I go to my a shell, and I run this command here, this lm login profile default, and that authenticates me for Chrome. And then it has the cookies and stuff that it can. That's the only thing I need to do. I have to do that. It can't do that itself. But once everything else it did. So I said, okay, I'm authenticated. And I thought I would have to give it permission to create the notebook, but I didn't have to do that. And so it created the notebook. It says now it's researching. I'll do a focus query on ovaries. That's the author, specific arguments. And then it's letting the research run. It's waiting 35 seconds and then checking the status because it needed to let the research go. It found the sources. It imported the sources. It reviewed them to pick the best 3 for the videos. And then it created the videos and ran the videos. So, and I haven't watched the videos yet, but that's the next thing that I'm going to do. But I was just really excited that like they did everything. I thought I would have to like give her permission to run the video or create the notebook. I didn't have to do that. It did everything. The only thing I needed to do was authenticate, like I mentioned. And what's really neat is that like it's getting kind of more and more human, like and the autonomy that it has, and also in the communication. Because when you're communicating with it, it feels a lot more like you're like interacting with a person than it used to. And when when I say it's more human, like what I mean is I gave it some wrong information. And in the past, that would like kind of like kill it. Like it wouldn't be able to go past that. But now it's able to go like, hey, like for example, I told it I would need to um, authenticate or give it permission to run the video. Sorry, to create the notebook. And the reason for that was when you give it permissions, it will give it to you in different scopes. So it'll say like just this once, or for the session, or for the project. And so in a previous session, I had been prompted to give it permission to create a notebook. And it said just this once. And so I inferred from that, oh, unfortunately, each time I'm going to have to do that. That one wasn't scoped. But no, it's able to do that. And the key point I'm making here is that Claude Code figured that out. So even though I told it incorrectly that I could only do it this once, it figured out, no, I can create the notebook. And then it went ahead and it did the whole task. It created the notebook, which I showed. I'll end this video with this because I kind of rambled on long enough. But let me go to the notebook that it created. So, sorry, let me get to the right one. This is the notebook. So this is the first thing I did in this video. Then creating, I refreshed it so it had the video. So it created the notebook. It figured out the sources. It figured out which to load the notebook into. And then it used the notebook to create the videos. And what I'm intending to do is just refine the process. So I'm going to watch the videos and I'll delete the notebook. I'll have it delete the notebook and create a new notebook and then just try to add features each time and try to perfect the process to get better and better notebooks. And really excited that this thing worked. But one of the main things I wanted to share was that this Claude Code is more powerful than what I anticipated. Like, if you're interested in this sort of thing, that there's like OpenClaw and different ways to create agents and so forth. And I anticipate that at some point I want to get into all of that. But just having this Claude Code and being able to do this task on create notebooks is like, I mean, this is one of the main things that I do is to create notebooks to, I've just loved these videos that NotebookLM comes up with. And it only took it like 3 minutes. It's like the Claude Code did the research for the sources, created the notebook, imported the sources into the notebook, and created the videos in like 3 minutes. Incredible. Now the notebook part takes longer because each video takes about 10 minutes to create. So I didn't time how long that was, but I know from experience, it takes from, 5 to 10 minutes to create the videos. But the Claude Code part of it was very short, which is really cool because Anthropic is kind of limits your usage compared to like Gemini or OpenAI. So I was really excited to come up with this workflow that burns very few tokens. And so like offloading it to NotebookLM, where you don't have to worry about that. And like the whole thing worked, it did this thing. So I hope I hope it's exciting for you, the viewer watching this, as it was for me, because just using Claude Code is very, very easy because you can just like talk to it like you would a person. And I'm really excited that it has a lot more power than what I thought it had. Well, thanks for watching, and until next time.